The cantina was buzzing with life as usual, filled with the clinks and hums of 100 alien conversations. As the doors slid open, Frin stepped inside, looking around with a sense of satisfaction. She was taller, stronger, with thick muscle and a sharpened gaze, a stark contrast from her old self. She wore human-made tactical gear, complete with a jacket bristling with pockets up and down each sleeve. Across the room, her sister Rammer spotted her and immediately burst into laughter. "Frin! By the stars, look at you! What on earth have they been feeding you down there?" Frin grinned as she made her way over, enjoying the attention. "Oh, you know, just the usual, protein, grit, and enough black coffee to fuel a spaceship." Rammer gaped as she looked her up and down, eyes wide with disbelief. "Coffee? And what's with that outfit? You look like you're about to storm a battlefield with that many pockets. Are you hiding an entire armory in there?" Frin chuckled, tapping a pocket. "These? Lifesavers. Humans have this concept called being prepared. Ever had to pull out a plasma wrench and a medkit at the same time? Trust me, I'm ready for anything." Rammer just shook her head, still sizing her up. "You're practically unrecognizable. It's like they sculpted you from rock. What else did they put you through?" Frin gave a playful smirk. "Push-ups for one." Rammer's brow furrowed. "Push-ups? What are those?" "Exercise," Frin said with a grin, flexing her arms. "Humans do it all the time. You get down on the floor and push your own weight up and down. Supposed to make you stronger." Rammer squinted. "That sounds terrible. And what's wrong with lifting weights like a normal being?" Frin laughed, patting her shoulder. "They have weights too. But something about those push-ups. They swear by them. And look," she said, proudly rolling her shoulder, "I could lift a storage crate on my own if I wanted to." Rammer shook her head, a smile of disbelief spreading across her face. "I don't even know who you are anymore. You look almost human." Frin gasped in mock offense. "That's just rude, Rammer. But well, I've picked up a few habits. They taught me if something's worth doing, it's worth overdoing." Rammer snorted, clapping her on the shoulder. "Earth's changed you, all right? But don't worry," she added with a wink. "We'll keep you grounded. Starting with a proper drink." Frin grinned, sliding onto the bar stool beside her. "Make mine a double, black, no sugar." Rammer groaned but waved over the bartender. The two sisters settled in, laughing and catching up as the cantina's noise buzzed around them. They shared stories, laughs, and traded curious looks as Frin filled Rammer in on her strange new world, one push-up, one pocket, and one mug of black coffee at a time. The bustling cantina on Station Delta 9 was packed with all kinds of creatures, from towering, feathered options to small, scaly karateach who clung to walls. In every corner, conversations in a dozen alien languages overlapped with clinking glasses and the hum of the bar's neon lights. Frin sat at a table with Rammer and their friend Tinel, the three of them looking like an odd trio against the background of exotic species. Frin, however, looked the oddest of all, with her broad-shouldered stance, muscular arms, and human-issued tactical vest, complete with an absurd number of pockets. Tinel squinted at her, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "So, Frin, what's that thing in your hand?" She pointed with a black claw to the steaming mug Frin held, her nostrils flaring. Frin grinned, holding up the mug proudly. "This, Tinel, is coffee. Black coffee. No sugar, no additives. Pure fuel." Rammer wrinkled her snout, recoiling a bit. "Pure? Are you serious? You're drinking that unfiltered?" Frin chuckled, taking a confident sip and trying to ignore the bitter punch that still surprised her every time. "That's right. This is what gets humans through the day. It's a tradition. A ritual, almost. They say it makes you strong." Tinel, baffled, exchanged a look with Rammer. "Is this why humans are so relentless?" Tinel asked, leaning in with morbid curiosity. This coffee is why they're so wound up? Friend let out a laugh. Probably helps. You should have seen my squadmates back on Earth. They wouldn't even start the day without it. And if they run out? Well, I saw a guy almost threaten a vending machine once. It's serious business. Rammer squinted, poking a finger toward the mug cautiously. And you actually like it? Friend shrugged, taking another sip to prove her point. You'd get used to it. Plus, it's all we get most days. Black as space itself and twice as unforgiving. She chuckled, but even she had to admit, the stuff had grown on her, almost as much as it terrified her alien companions. A passing server, a young green-scaled Carthian, overheard and snickered, shaking his head. Humans are strange. My people believe in slow mornings, warm herbal teas and soft ambient sounds, not boiling bitterness. Friend laughed. That would drive most humans crazy, I think. They're all about charging forward, right from the start. She set the mug down with a satisfied smack of her lips. Maybe that's why they're so intense. Tinel, watching with wide, bewildered eyes, finally muttered, Maybe that's why you're so intense. Rammer snorted, shaking her head. I still can't believe you're drinking that. Remember back home? You barely touched the bitterbark tonic. Hey, bitterbark doesn't give you that same boost. Friend winked, tapping the side of her head. Humans swear this stuff sharpens the senses, makes them ready for anything. And after a while, I guess I can't live without it either. Rammer rolled her eyes. Next thing we know, you'll be throwing around all those weird phrases they say. Oh, you mean Earth slang? Friend's grin widened as she exaggeratedly flexed her arms. Don't worry, I'm not about to go full beast mode on you guys. Rammer and Tinel exchanged another glance, both perplexed and entertained. Beast mode? Rammer repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. That sounds like something you'd use to describe a hunting frenzy? Kind of, I guess. Friend laughed. But humans use it to mean going all out, pushing their limits. One of my squad mates used to say it before every training drill, and then he'd just go all in, like a crazed Valkarn on a hunt. Tinel shook her head, a grin spreading across her face. You're a whole different Friend, you know that? Talking about beast mode, gulping down coffee, and strutting around like you're ready for a human war. Guess they rubbed off on me, Friend replied with a smile. She didn't deny it, she felt more alive than ever. Humans just have this way of charging into life with everything they've got. It's hard not to get swept up in it. Rammer leaned in, her eyes narrowing mischievously. All right, warrior Friend. So, what else do you do now that you've become part human? Besides the coffee and the pockets? Friend laughed, crossing her arms proudly. Oh, I've picked up a few things. Like, I can't just sit around on breaks anymore. Humans have this thing called sprints. We run as fast as we can for short bursts, as if we're being chased. Rammer's jaw dropped. You run? For fun? Oh, yeah? A sprint here, a push-up there, maybe a few pull-ups, Friend said, flexing one arm to show off her bicep. Tinel covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. If you start wearing one of those weird earth caps backward, I might lose it. Friend laughed, taking another hearty sip of her coffee, shrugging with an easy smile. Who knows? Maybe I will. They're actually pretty comfortable. Rammer shook her head, grinning. I don't know who you are anymore, Friend, but Earth has definitely done something to you. You're half human, I swear. Friend leaned back in her chair, looking around the cantina with a kind of fondness. Maybe. But it's kind of fun, right? Earth taught me to push my limits, take risks. And, well, she raised her mug in a mock toast. You never know when you might need a little beast mode yourself. Rammer and Tinel just laughed, still shaking their heads as they tried to imagine their friend doing sprints and push-ups as her new relaxation. But as they watched her sip her black coffee with a grin, They couldn't help but feel she was right. Fryn had changed. She was still one of them, but Earth's influence had brought something new out in her, something determined, gritty, and just a little bit human. The formal council chamber felt oppressive, even for Fryn, who'd been through grueling training drills on Earth. The air in the room was still, heavy with the musk of authority. At a long, elevated table sat the Apalian elders, their silvery and speckled fur signaling wisdom and rank. They watched her with narrowed eyes, their expressions a blend of curiosity and disdain. Fryn stood in the center of the room, shoulders back and arms stiff at her sides, her gaze steady. She could feel the judgment radiating from each one of them. "Corporal Fryn," began Elder Sarek, his voice carrying a practiced weight. "We've called you here to understand more about your experiences in the human military." Fryn nodded, keeping her face neutral. "Of course, Elder Sarek. I'm honored to share what I've learned." Sarek's eyes narrowed. "Yes, I'm sure you are. Though one has to wonder how much of this learning is influencing your loyalty. After all, you are Apalian, not human." Fryn held back a sigh. She'd known this would be difficult, but the veiled accusation stung more than she expected. "I am Apalian, Elder. My loyalty to our people has not wavered." "Hasn't it?" interjected Elder Tyrex, his dark-furred muzzle twitching with skepticism. "I understand humans are persistent. Perhaps overly so. But tell me, do they compensate for something deeper? A fear, perhaps?" Fryn's jaw clenched, but she kept her expression as calm as she could. "Fear, Elder Tyrex? If you think that, then you don't know humans at all." Elder Sarek's brows rose, and a few other elders murmured, casting glances at each other. Tyrex, however, leaned forward, his eyes sharp and unrelenting. "Oh? And what do I fail to understand, then, Corporal?" Fryn took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "Humans aren't driven by fear in combat, Elder. I've seen them in the thick of it, standing their ground when most would flee. They don't fight out of a need to prove something to themselves. They fight because they want to protect those they care about, even if that person is a stranger." "Protecting strangers?" Elder Tyrex scoffed, his lip curling in disdain. "How convenient! And yet I have reports of their excessive force, of entire fleets deployed to resolve minor conflicts. Is that not overcompensation? A kind of pretense of strength to intimidate?" Fryn felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, Elder, humans don't fight to intimidate. They fight with everything they have because they don't believe in doing anything halfway. And I've seen firsthand that they don't distinguish between their own and their allies. They'll fight just as hard for us as they would for each other." Tyrex's eyes narrowed, and he exchanged a meaningful look with Sarek, who then turned back to Fryn. "Corporal, surely you must realize how concerning it is that they go to such lengths. We fear there may be underlying motives. Humans do not have the best reputation for restraint." Fryn felt her patience wearing thin. "They don't have the best reputation because they are willing to do what others won't." She shot back, a hint of irritation seeping into her voice. "Humans are adaptable, fierce, and loyal to a fault. They don't believe in leaving someone behind or turning their back on an ally. If you think that's overcompensation, then you're missing the point of what they value." The room grew tense as the elders shifted uncomfortably, some of them muttering under their breath. Fryn couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Here she was, trying to explain something she'd come to believe in deeply, yet they looked at her as if she were contaminated. Sarek cleared his throat, his expression hardening. "Corporal Fryn, your defense of humans is noted. But tell me this, how can a species so quick to violence, so excessive in its methods, be trusted to value peace?" "They don't love violence, Elder. They value peace more than you know, precisely because they understand what it costs." Fryn's words came out before she could stop herself, her voice laden with conviction. "Humans don't seek out conflict, But when it comes to them, they meet it head on. I've fought alongside them, I've seen their courage, their resilience. They don't fight because they fear, Elder. They fight because they believe some things are worth the risk. Elder Tyrex's eyes narrowed further. And would you risk yourself for them, Fryn? After all, you seem quite taken with human values. Have they twisted your loyalty that far? Fryn met his gaze without flinching, her voice low but firm. Yes, Elder. I would risk myself for them, just as they have risked themselves for me. I have bled beside them, learned from them, and they've treated me as one of their own. Isn't that what true loyalty is? Silence blanketed the room. The elders exchanged glances, some appearing disturbed, others almost intrigued. Fryn's pulse thudded in her ears as she watched them, bracing herself for their response. Finally, Elder Sarek spoke, his tone a shade softer but still critical. It is a delicate thing, loyalty. One must guard it carefully, lest it drift. Fryn clenched her fists, the frustration rising again. With all due respect, Elder, loyalty isn't something that drifts. It's something earned. And humans, well, they earn it. Every day. Not through words, but through their actions. I stand with them because I've seen what they're willing to do for us, even when it costs them. Elder Tyrex leaned back, arms crossed, his expression skeptical. You speak of these humans as if they are noble. And yet they have conquered, invaded, destroyed. How can you reconcile that? Fryn's gaze sharpened. Humans don't pretend to be perfect, Elder. They know their flaws. But they don't run from them either. They learn from their mistakes, and they grow. And if you saw what I've seen, you'd understand that they don't just fight for themselves. They fight for the idea of something better, something fairer. They fight for each other, for their families, and yes, even for allies like us. The room fell silent again. The elders stared at her, expressions ranging from contempt to curiosity. But Fryn held her ground, her head high and her heart racing. She had given her answer, made her stand. Let them think what they would. Finally, Elder Sarek nodded, albeit grudgingly. Very well, Corporal Fryn. We understand your perspective. But remember, your loyalty is to your own people, first and foremost. Fryn felt a bitter taste in her mouth, but she forced herself to nod. I understand, Elder. My loyalty to my people is unshaken. But so is my loyalty to those who have proven theirs to me. The elders exchanged one last look, murmuring quietly among themselves. Fryn could sense their discomfort, their distrust, but she didn't care. She was done hiding her admiration, her respect. Humans had shown her a path forward, a strength she'd never known existed. And no matter what the elders thought, she knew where her loyalties lay, loyalties forged not by words, but by the bonds built in the heart of battle. Fryn stood there, the tension in the council chamber thickening with each silent heartbeat. The elders sat before her, unmoving, their expressions ranging from disapproval to thinly veiled contempt. She could feel their doubt, their suspicion weighing down on her, as if she were some corrupted entity. But for all their power and their stern looks, they couldn't touch the fire blazing within her. Corporal Fryn, Elder Sarek finally spoke, his tone as cold as polished steel. You seem to have mistaken your loyalties. Perhaps you've spent so long with these humans that you've forgotten your own people, your own culture. It is understandable to be influenced, but a line must be drawn. Fryn's fist clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. She'd heard enough, and every word they spoke only made her pulse pound harder. All the missions she'd gone on, the times she'd stood shoulder to shoulder with her human comrades, the sacrifices she'd seen them make, it all flashed through her mind in an instant. These elders would never understand. They didn't know what it meant to fight with humans, to truly stand beside them, to witness the depth of their loyalty. She straightened, feeling her hackles rise. With respect, Elder Sarek, I know exactly where my loyalty lies. And it isn't misplaced. Is that so? Elder Tyrex interjected, his voice mocking. It seems you've been charmed by their grand gestures. They act with force and fervor to mask their insecurities. It's overcompensation, pure and simple. Friend's gaze sharpened, her jaw tightening. Overcompensation? She could barely hold back the rush of anger that filled her. You think they're afraid? That's what you see when you look at humanity. Then you don't know them at all. I've seen them stand against forces they had no hope of defeating, knowing full well the risk. They're not afraid. They're determined. They're loyal. They'll give everything they have, not for glory, not for fear, but because it's the right thing to do. Elder Sarek's gaze hardened, his voice icy and controlled. Their recklessness is dangerous. They're willing to throw themselves into battle with little thought for consequences, dragging others along with them. Tell me, Corporal, would you risk your life for these humans, as they so recklessly risk theirs? Friend's chest swelled with something fierce and unyielding. She straightened, eyes blazing. Yes, Elder. I would. And I have. I've fought beside them, I bled beside them, and I'd do it again without hesitation. A shocked silence filled the chamber, but Friend pressed on, letting everything she felt pour out of her, no longer holding back. You may see me as just another alien, just another soldier. But to them? They don't see me that way. They call me their brother. Do you understand what that means? To them, I am family. Not because of shared blood or species, but because of the bond we've forged in battle, the sacrifices we've made together. Elder Tyrex scoffed, his face twisted in disdain. Sentimentality. A convenient excuse for their aggression. Friend felt her muscles tighten, her hackles rising further. Her voice lowered, thick with anger. Aggression? Is that what you call standing up for others, protecting those who can't protect themselves? Humans aren't perfect, no. They're flawed, they make mistakes. But they own those mistakes, they learn, and they fight not just for themselves, but for anyone they call friend. For anyone they deem worth defending. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, some of them clearly rattled by the intensity in her voice, the unyielding resolve in her eyes. She knew they could never understand, not really. They hadn't seen what she had. They hadn't stood on that burning ridge on the outer colonies, watching as human soldiers, some of them barely out of training, held their line against overwhelming odds. She'd seen it, felt it, the fierce loyalty that radiated from them, the unbreakable resolve that had ignited something deep within her. Elder Sarek, she said, her voice softer but no less fierce. I have seen humans fight not just for themselves, but for me, for my squad, for strangers. They don't see us as just aliens. They see us as comrades. They treat us as equals, as family. And to me, that is worth more than any tradition, any title, or any heritage you think I should hold dear. Sarek's face tightened, his eyes dark and calculating. Careful, Corporal. You are dangerously close to treason. Friend's heart pounded, but she stood her ground unwavering. If loyalty to those who have stood by me, who have risked everything for me, is treason, then so be it. A murmur rippled through the elders, a mix of shock and outrage. Friend could feel the weight of their disdain pressing on her, the isolation creeping in, but it didn't weaken her resolve. In her mind she saw the faces of her human squadmates, the ones who had given her a nickname, who had laughed and shared their coffee, who had charged into battle with her as though she were one of them. They had treated her as family. And in her heart she knew, no counsel, no authority could take that away. Finally, Elder Sarek spoke again, his voice hard and cold. Perhaps we were wrong to send you to Earth. You have returned with dangerous ideas. You have allowed yourself to be tainted by their reckless spirit. Friend held her head high, her voice unwavering. If believing in loyalty, in sacrifice, in family is dangerous, then maybe you need to reconsider your own values. Another murmur rose, louder this time, the elders visibly uncomfortable. Friend didn't care. She'd said her piece, and nothing they could say would change what she felt, what she knew. She'd found something more valuable than blind obedience to tradition. She'd found a family, forged not by blood but by bonds that ran deeper. Elder Tyrex's face darkened as he met her gaze. "You are changed, Corporal Fryn." "Perhaps irreversibly so." Fryn felt a flicker of something close to pride. "Then I'll take that as a compliment, Elder. Because I know now that loyalty is earned, not demanded. And the humans? They have earned mine, in ways you may never understand." The silence in the chamber was absolute, the elders stunned into stillness. Fryn could feel their judgment, their disappointment, but she no longer cared. The fire inside her had burned away any doubt, any guilt. She'd made her choice, and she'd made it freely. Let them condemn her if they wanted, she had her family, and no council could take that from her. The council chamber doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, and Fryn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She felt the weight of the council's disapproval lingering like a dark cloud, but for the first time, it didn't bother her. She had stood up for what she believed in, spoken her truth. No matter what the elders thought, she knew her loyalty was exactly where it belonged. As she walked through the quiet corridors of the station, her thoughts drifted to her human squadmates, those who had welcomed her, taught her, and fought beside her. Faces flashed through her mind: Sergeant Hayes with his booming laugh, Private Kim who'd insisted on sharing her coffee stash, even Lieutenant Alvarez, who'd given her the nickname Ironclad. Each of them had left an imprint on her, teaching her what it meant to truly stand by someone, not because of tradition or duty, but because of choice. Fryn paused by one of the large observation windows, looking out at the dark expanse of space scattered with stars. She remembered her first deployment with humans, the uncertainty and fear she'd felt as they prepared to drop onto a hostile world. But she'd watched the humans that day, watched the way they checked on each other, the way they nodded to her, their eyes full of unspoken reassurance. They hadn't just treated her as another soldier, they had treated her as one of them. In that moment, they'd become her family, and she never looked back. She thought of the council's words, accusations of betrayal, of dangerous loyalty. The elders couldn't understand it, not really. They hadn't seen what she had, hadn't experienced that fierce camaraderie born in the fire of battle. They had their traditions, their titles, their strict loyalty to their own. But Fryn had found something more powerful, something that transcended species and origin. She'd found belonging. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth as she placed a hand against the cold glass, staring out into the stars. She could see herself continuing down this path, carrying on the warrior way, with those who had fought beside her, who had proven themselves time and time again. Humans were flawed, yes, but they were honest about it. They didn't hide their imperfections, didn't mask their struggles. And that, she'd realized, was what made them so fierce, so resilient. They accepted their darkness and carried on, unafraid. Fryn took a deep breath, feeling a calm resolve settle over her. She knew the path forward now, knew that whatever the council or her people thought, her loyalty was forged in the fire of shared battles, and nothing could change that. In her heart, she knew the truth. She had found her place, her purpose. She belonged with the humans, her brothers, as they called her. The word held weight, a sense of unbreakable trust and mutual respect. She'd earned that title, and she wasn't about to let it go. "I've walked with humans into battle," she thought, a warm sense of pride swelling in her chest. "And I know now, this is my family, the only one I need." Turning from the window, she began her walk back to the docking bay where her human squadmates would soon return from their own council meetings. She was ready to greet them, to fall into step with her family once more, and to face whatever came next, together. Sergeant Hayes leaned against the cold metal wall of the docking bay, arms crossed as he watched Fryn stride across the platform toward her squad. There was a quiet confidence in her step, her gaze steady, a touch defiant. He couldn't help the small grin tugging at his lips as she approached, eyes glinting with that familiar intensity she'd picked up over her years with the human unit. "Look at her," Private Kim murmured from beside him, her voice low but full of pride. "I swear, she's more human than we are." Hayes chuckled, nodding in agreement. "You're not wrong there. She's got more grit than half our new recruits." He watched as Frin exchanged a few words with Lieutenant Alvarez, her posture relaxed but alert, the way she unconsciously adjusted the straps on her tactical vest, an old habit of theirs she'd adopted without even knowing it. Watching her, Hayes felt a pang of something he hadn't expected. It wasn't just pride, it was a sense of kinship, of belonging. Frin had come to them as an outsider, hesitant and reserved, alien in more ways than one. Yet over time, he'd watched her open up, watched her pick up their slang, share in their jokes, even shoulder their burdens. It was as if she'd slowly woven herself into their fold, until now it felt strange to even think of her as anything other than one of them. "She calls us brothers, you know," Kim continued, a fond smile playing on her lips. "It's a little thing, but it means something, doesn't it?" Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, it does. More than she might ever realize." He couldn't put his finger on it exactly, how humans had this knack for pulling people into their orbit, forging bonds that went beyond blood or species. Frin had become a testament to that, an unspoken example of how, through shared trials, they'd bridge that gap between human and alien. In a way, she embodied the best of them, fierce, loyal, stubborn, and unbreakable. She wasn't just another soldier, she was family. As he watched her laugh with Alvarez, his grin softened. "To think," he muttered to himself, "she feels more human than alien now. Maybe that's just the human way, making anyone we care about one of us." Kim nodded, her eyes glinting with the same pride he felt. "I wouldn't have it any other way."